Alright, hello and welcome back to another episode of Mr. Pisto Plays. This time we have another top 5 at the beginning of each set. I like to do a top 5 Brawl Commanders. This time we're going to look at Standard. Let me know if you want to do a historic type dealio for this. These are my top 5 favorite. They're in no particular order except for the last card I go over. More of a favorite. These I think are going to be really fun. Gonna be cool to build around, and they're gonna have lots of different ways to do so. So that's kind of the goal of this. Is it's not a top 5, oh these are going to be the most powerful commanders in the format, although some of them might be. I think they're going to be the top 5 most fun to build around and fun to play. So yes, like I said, let me know if you want me to do a historic brawl version of this. That might be a little more complicated with rotation. We now have much fewer cards to pick from, so there's going to be some that really shine for a while until we get more sets added into Standard. So like, subscribe, notify. Let's get into Mr. Pisto Plays top 5 favorite Standard Brawl Commanders. The first one we have is Liesa, Forgotten Archangel, 5 mana, 4/5 flying lifelink. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, return that card to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. So obviously removal spells and anything that destroys creatures is going to be great with this. I didn't really put them in the cards that I'm kind of highlighting for the deck or for different ways to build a deck, but the idea of this exiling things when they die and your opponents can't use them again is great, and being able to re-enter the battlefield effects like Intrepid Advisory. You can play it early as a 3/1 with lifelink, and then later if Liesa is out and it dies, you can start using its, I guess in some ways, a multi-kicker, because you can pay a white and a colorless and pay that as many times as you want, and creatures you control get a +1/+1 for each Valor counter on Intrepid Advisory, which means you can redo it, you can let it die, bring it back, cast it for more. The Guardian Savior could be another way you build this deck. You could go a Lurus style of thing with creatures where you're playing really small mana value creatures, and then Guardian Savior enters the battlefield and you can start reusing them from the graveyard along with Liesa, getting them back to your hand. Fleshstalker is another cool card. It's a sacrifice outlet, and then whenever you sacrifice another creature, you gain 1 life and scry 1. You can sacrifice a creature with Liesa out, you get it back in your hand at the beginning of your end step to recast it again and kind of cycle. It's a Guardian Savior, also an angel. I put Rampage of Valkyries on the board because I'm pretty sure this is one of the best creature versions of an angel commander. You do have Kaya, the Planeswalker, but if you want to go creature centric and not play Kaya, but play an actual angel as your commander, Liesa might be your choice. That's the first card I'm highlighting. Next one, we have Rem, Kaolus, Stalwart Slayer, 3 mana, 2/3 flying haste, and if a spell would deal damage to you or another permanent you control, prevent that damage. The spell would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage. 1. So there are 2 cards, well I guess 3 cards that are more the spell heavy variant, with Sacred Fire dealing 2 damage to any target and you're gaining 2 life. It's like mini lightning helix. Play with Fire, a better shock, dealing 2 damage to any target, and if you deal damage to a player you get to scry 1. Thermal Alchemist for all those instants and sorceries that you're probably going to play in the deck if you want to play it that way. It deals 1 damage to each opponent, and then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you get to untap that. Another way that you could play this Rem Kaolus deck is an Adeline Resplendent Cathar style of deck, which is a creature heavy, aggressive, Boros style deck. And this creature's power is equal to the number of creatures you control. It has vigilance, so it attacks and it blocks. Protect, it attack. And whenever you attack, for each opponent, create a 1/1 white human creature token that's tapped and attacking that player or a planeswalker they control. So you could play Boros aggro, you could play Boros spells. It's kind of a double-edged sword. Really cool. I think it's going to be fun. Next card on the list, I have Teferi, who slows the sunset. Control, Azorius control, vanquish the horde. I think Triska Decaphile could be fun, but Teferi is a 4 mana, 4 loyalty planeswalker. It has a +1. You get to choose up to 1 target artifact, up to 1 target creature, and up to 1 target land. Untap the chosen permanents you control. Tap chosen permanents you don't control. You gain 2 life. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put 1 of them into your hand and the rest in the bottom of the library in a random order. -7. You get an emblem with untap all permanents you control during each opponent's untap step. You draw a card during each opponent's draw step. So if you can get to the ultimate, it is pretty much game over. +1, it protects you if you have a creature in play. It also can tap something down if you're going aggro. So that is another way. I really didn't think of it that way, but in theory, you could play like an Azorius aggro style deck, maybe a Flyers style deck, where you're using the +1 to tap down a creature they control and untap an artifact and a land that you control, and you're gaining some life. Card draw is card draw, or card selection, I should say. And like I said, the emblem is probably over. Vanquish the Horde, I'm looking at it as more of a control style deck, so being able to destroy all creatures for effectively 2 mana, or could be 2 mana, is great. Even at 4, your Wrath of Godding or your Day of Judgment. Triska Decaphile could be a fun way to try and win by drawing cards and then having 13 cards in your hand to win the game. Borrow Time is our new Oblivion Ring style of effect, being able to exile a non-land permanent until an opponent controls until it leaves the battlefield. A great removal spell. And Faithful Mending, drawing 2 cards, gaining 2 life, and then discarding 2 cards. There are a decent number of flashback cards in the format. This is in and of itself one of them, so I think flashback is going to play a decent role in a Teferi deck. Also in any form of Azorius style of deck. So that is number 3 on my list. Number 4 on my list of cards that I think are going to be fun to build around and may be powerful, might not be powerful, might be great, but they're definitely good, is Wrenn and Seven. One of the cards you get if you did decide to buy the pre sales on Magic Online, or I mean I should say Magic Arena. It's a 5 mana, 5 loyalty planeswalker. It has 4 abilities. Typically 4 ability planeswalkers tend to break formats, but this one's costed in such a way that it might not. +1, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. Put all land cards revealed this way into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. So you probably, the creature lands are going to be great. Utility lands are going to be very good with this card. At 0, put any number of land cards from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. So if you already have a bunch of lands in play, you can go from like 5 to 7, let's say, or even 5 to 8. And then you can start playing some banger cards. It's -3 as you create a treeful creature token with reach land. This creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. So it's you can get a very powerful card, because if you're not ramping with creatures, you're probably wanting to ramp in this style of deck with cards that put lands into play rather than cards that, rather than creature cards, because the -3 is how it protects itself so that you can start building it up. And then -8, return all permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. You get an emblem with, you have no maximum hand size. So it gets pretty big. Maybe you'll get to that ultimate. The ultimate is not backbreaking, but it can be very, very powerful. Cards like Balaga's Recovery, Dryad's Revival, returning cards from your graveyard to your hand. Dryad's Revival may be better in this case because it has flashback, so if you do end up hitting it with the +1, you can still cast it later in the game, or you could kind of loop. No, you can't loop because it's exiled. And anyways, you could loop Dryad's Revival and Balaga's Recovery back and forth, which would be kind of funny if you cast them with the regular casting costs. Augur of Autumn, I think it's going to be a staple in all green decks, and especially in this format and in the Historic Brawl and in Commander. Look at the top cards of your library at any time. You can play lands from the top of your library, and then if you have creatures with 3 different powers, the new Coven, or Coven, however you want to pronounce it, you can cast creature spells from the top of your library. Coven is one of the new mechanics in set. And then the last card, Storm of Festivals, 6 mana. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put up to 2 permanent cards with mana value 5 or less among them onto the battlefield, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So if you are going to put this card in your deck, you're in some ways having to build around it by maybe you play less 6, 7, 8 casting spells as far as creatures or planeswalkers or permanents go. You're playing more of the 5, so you're playing more of a mid-rangey style of deck, which I think mono green can do. You still have the big elephant from Kaldheim in the set, along with some other really good mid-rangey cards. So Wrenn and Seven, you're playing with your graveyard, and you're playing lots of lands. And the final card of the video. Let me see if you can guess. I'll give you 10 seconds. Put it in the description below. You get to this video. What do you think my top card is? 3, 2, 1. Boop. It is Tovolar, Dire Overlord, and Tovolar the Midnight Scourge. Werewolves, werewolves, werewolves. I think this is just such a cool creature type. It's been one of my favorite creature types for a long time, and I think Tovolar finally gives us a commander, especially in actual EDH, that can really push the werewolf clan, werewolf creature type over the top. 3 mana, 3/3, so his casting cost is great. It does die to most things, but hey, it's a werewolf. Whenever a wolf or a werewolf you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So if you have 3 wolves that hit, you draw 3 cards. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more wolves and or werewolves, it becomes night, and then transform any number of human werewolves you control. When it comes into play, you're day bound. As soon as you have 3 or more werewolves or wolves, which includes itself, so you only need 2 extra, becomes night bound. And its night-bound form has the same text. Whenever a werewolf or a wolf deals damage to a combat damage to a player, you get to draw a card. But then it has Kessig Wolf Run's ability. Target wolf or werewolf you control gets +X/+O and gains trample until the end of turn. Kessig Wolf Run hit anything. This only does hit wolves, werewolves. But if you're playing Tovolar, you're playing werewolves. We have some very powerful ones. We have Tovolar's Huntmaster and Tovolar's Pack Leader. 6 mana, 6/6 that comes with 2 2/2, so it's a 6 mana 10/10. And then you can flip it. And whenever Tovolar's Pack Leader enters the battlefield or attacks, you get 2 green wolf creature tokens, and then you can have another wolf or werewolf you control fight another target creature you don't control for 4 mana. This comes down on 6. You might flip it that turn even. Flip it the next turn, attack, and you're attacking for 7, plus adding 2 more creatures to the battlefield. Another great one of these werewolves that comes from the set is Kessig Naturalist and Lord of the Ulvenwald. 2 mana, 2/2. Whenever it attacks, you add red or a green mana, and to the end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. So when you go from combat to pre-combat post-combat to your main phase, you get to keep that red or green. And then if it goes from day bound to night bound, it transforms into Lord of the Ulvenwald. Other werewolves and wolves get +1/+1, and it has the same ability of when it attacks, you get a green or a red mana, and it doesn't leave your mana pool, and it is a 3/3. Masked Vandal, Changeling. The Changeling mechanic I think can be important in this. There are only so many Changelings, but this one is a good one. It is a werewolf that exiles enchantments and artifacts. You do have to exile a card from your graveyard, but that's okay. And then Unnatural Growth. Green, green, green might be kind of hard, but you are only a 2-color deck. 5 mana, I've played a bit with this deck, and it's probably going to be my first video in Standard Brawl. Let me know if you want to see Historic Brawl, Standard Brawl. I'm a little bit sick of all the 5-color stuff, so I think I'm going to hit Standard Brawl for a little bit, and maybe the Historic Brawl will get some bannings, hopefully. But a natural growth. At the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until the end of turn. This gets insane. Attacking for 16, 18, 20. It's just your normal, regular creatures. So, yeah. Tovolar, Dire Overlord is probably my favorite card from the set. I am a sucker for green. And those are Mr. Pisto Plays top 5 Brawl Commanders in the standard format. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or night, wherever you are in the world. Like, subscribe, notify, comment, share.